learning now Tanya, chapter 12, page 32, and we are 6 lines from the bottom, the last word on the line, which is the last word of line number 6, which starts with avo. And the Alter Rebbe is teaching us about the mahus, the makeup of the Beinani, of his prototype individual, which is potential man to perfect themselves in the best way. Avram, if you don't mind muting yourself, I'd appreciate it. So the Alter Rebbe now continues saying that the Beinani at the time of davening, particularly during the time of Krishma, saying the Shema, and Shmon Esrei, and the blessings before and after Shema, during that time there shines upon the individual something very awesome called Moichen de Gadlus, supernal intellect, which is a lofty level of godliness that exists only at that time. And because it's such a special godly revelation, it makes an impact on the person below when he says Shema, Shmon Esrei, and the blessings of Krishma. And therefore, during that time, it feels. Now, I want you to remember the word feels that I'm using right now, because the Alter Rebbe says the same concept. It feels as though he doesn't have a Yetzer Hara. Because at that time, he's truly connected to the highest level, because he's given an assistance by God, because God is shining down something very powerful. And that's why you see during Shema and during Shemon Esrei, during these times, you see an average individual who takes it a little more seriously and davens with a little more kavanah, closes their eyes, thinks about Hashem more. Why is that? Because since from on high, the channel for that is open, so below, when we daven, we connect with it. So therefore, it feels as though the Yetzer Hara is gone. So what does the Alter Rebbe say? Now let's continue. Line number 6 from the bottom, the last word. Avol, acharat tefillah. What happens after you daven? When this supernal wisdom, supernal intellect of God's greatness is removed, it leaves. It leaves. Harei hara choizer v'neir. The bad, the temptations and urges return, and v'neir, and are awakened. B'chol elasmoli, in the left ventricle, u'mesavet taiva, and the Beinani has an urge of taiva, of desire and lust, l'taivas olam haza v'tainugav, to all worldly pleasures. It's like he didn't daven at all. What happened over here? Because from on high, the gift that you got, let's call it like a spiritual impregnation, which is not, we'll talk about that later in Tanya, in chapter 14, you kind of were impregnated with this godly sensation during Shema and Shmon Esrei, and afterwards, the baby comes out. You're not pregnant anymore. You're on your own. Oh, I'm on my own. So what surfaces back? The real self, which is urges. So in other words, what does this tell us? That even at the time of Shmon Esrei, it wasn't who the Beinani is. It was only something superimposed on him vis-a-vis Tefillah, Shmon Esrei, Shema, and the person feels elated. It's like, when you come into a beis medrash, and you come into a shul, you go to the kaisel, you go to the shimon, whatever, you come to a situation, or you feel elated, you feel different, you feel moved. You feel you want to do tshuva. You feel your ego. You want to rid your ego. That's very nice. But when you leave, you're back to the self. Let's continue. Rak mipnei sheloi loi levadoi. Loi here is with a vav. However, since he himself does not have mishpat hamalucha v'amshala, the dominion over Be'ir, the city, meaning the body, ein yochel lohoitzi taivose mekoyach el hapoel. Oh. So the Alter Rebbe is going back and forth, Chevra. He's playing both sides, okay? So he says, wait a second. You're telling me that after davening, the Ra, the temptations, Moshe, and the urges come back to haunt us. Okay, so why don't I act on it? And remember, a Beinoni doesn't act on it. He doesn't do it in thought, speech, and action. But that's the Alter Rebbe's question now, Hillel. Why not? If the urges are burning and they're taking control, why doesn't he act on it? Says the Alter Rebbe, you know why? Because he isn't the only player in town. There are two players. One's called the Nefesh Abamis, the Yetzer Hara. One's called the Nefesh Ho'elokis, the Yetzer Tov. So by the Beinoni, the Nefesh Ho'elokis is stronger in regard to action, in regard to speech, in regard to thought. But as far as the soul is concerned, the drive inside, guess who's stronger? The Nefesh Abamis. So the urges will rage. But the Beinoni has trained himself to utilize the Nefesh Ho'elokis when the urges are raging. And therefore he says, quiet down. Or like we say sometimes, calm body. Calm body. Take it easy now. Breathe. Breathe out. Come on, breathe out. Take it easy. I know you're getting very upset. Relax. That's what's happening over here. Let's continue inside. And therefore, he cannot exert his taiva, his indulgence, from potential to actual. To do what? So that it would have invested itself in the limbs of the body. Maisa, in action, deeper speech, machshava. We're going on to top of page Yud Zayin, 17. Mamish. Lahamik machshavta b'tainugi olam hazeh. Now I have a question for you, Chevre. Why does the Alter Rebbe use the word mamish by machshava? He says the Nefesh Ho'elokis controls the Beinoni, so the Beinoni shouldn't act against Hashem. He shouldn't speak in ways that are against Hashem, and he shouldn't think about things that are against Hashem. Right? And take out the word mamish, the first word on page 17, on Yud Zayin. Moshe, are you with me? If you take out that word, it would still make sense. The Nefesh Ho'elokis, the Yetzer Tov, dominates the body to say in action, in speech, and thought, I'm great. I don't do it. I don't do what? To actively, to proactively make one's mind delve into the indulgence. In other words, here, look, an indulgence comes, I have a craving, I have an urge, I have a desire, fine, but I don't dwell on it. I don't dwell on it. I don't start, fantasizing and making up these scenarios, a virtual taiva, to take the taiva in the virtual world and to say, and make believe it's going to happen this way and that way. That he doesn't do, because that itself is also a prohibition of hirhuri type avera, which we discussed, thoughts of avera. So my question is, why the word mamish? Why do you have to have the word mamish for there? If the word mamish on the first word on page Yud Zayin wouldn't be there, it would be also self-understood, and there's a reason for it. Because machshava...
I have one thought.
Yeah.
I have one thought.
Go ahead.
And that is that, one of the startling Kedushim at the beginning of the Tanya is when he says that the Nefesh Ho'elokis is Chelek Elokah Mimal Mamash. mamish. So maybe it's like a hint back to the fact that the strength of the godly soul within him.
Oh, very good. Here we have. You see, now we could say it took Hillel 5 years learning Chassidus with us for 6 years, and he's on track. He's learning Chassidus, so it's worth the sheer. For him to say that 5-6 years later, it shows he's thinking. Okay, so what? Let's just for a second develop what you said. In machshava, in thought, there are 2 types of thought. There is innate thought that comes to you when you lay down in your bed and you're going into a sleep. You're still thinking, and then there's active thought, proactive thought. Not that you're kind of, looking to leave thought, but still thought doesn't leave you. Avram, thought is always with you, right? But that's not proactive. That's just a fact of the human condition. Then there's a proactive thought. What is the Alter Rebbe saying here? That by the Beinani, the machshava mamish, the proactive thought is what he doesn't engage in. But the subconscious thought, let's use those words, again, I don't know if it's correct, but it seems to be, the subconscious thought, that always exists. So how is that connected to what Hillel said before about the nefesh olikis? The chelik elikami mal mamosh, that the neshama is an actual part of the Jew, that's the essence. That's the essence of the Yid. That's the machshava. That's tantamount to the machshava of the Beinani who has this inner quarrel between the urge and the action, the urge and the development of the urge. And what the Alter Rebbe is saying, and he's going to say more in a moment, is that from to actually actualize, concretize the machshava, not the machshava that comes automatically, because that the Beinani can't help. You hear that? We cannot help that an urge comes to us. You know why? We were born in this world. Even if you didn't go to the Yankees and the Dodgers and the wrestling, and you didn't do all those things, so you have another urge. You got another urge, so you walk on Allenby, you walk in Tel Aviv, or whatever, or you walk in Madrid, everyone has urges. Being exposed to the world, it's a world of urges. And that the Alter Rebbe understands. And the Alter Rebbe says, God's not going to blame you for that. Because you're an average person, you were put in the world with taivas all around you. You know what the holy Rebbe Yitzchak Berditchever said about the Tanya? He said, if Hashem would put the taivas in the Tanya and the Tanya in the world, it would be wonderful. But what did Hashem do? He put the taivas right in front of our eyes. And he put God in a little book called the Tanya. And that's why it's so important. That's a statement of Rebbe Yitzchak Berditchever praising the Tanya, that the Alter Rebbe took this Hashem and he put it into one little book. But at the same time, he said, you have to realize that the taivas are all around you. Yes, Moshe.
Yeah, Rabbi Dalfin, in the English translation, this one, the classic.
Oh, the classic one, yeah.
So when it comes to talking about mamish, at the bottom of the previous page, it writes to carry out this desire from the potential into the actual by clothing itself in the bodily limbs, indeed, speech, and persistent thought.
Right.
It says persistent thought.
Yeah, so I called that proactive thought. Yeah, the same thing.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand. Persistent
thought means that you dwell on it, Moshe. You dwell on it, and that's what we're learning, Moshe. Is that's what the Beinani refrains from doing, right? Because his nefesh elikis stops him and says, "Don't spend time thinking about it." And this is a very important lesson, also, and the Rebbe writes this to Bachurim in Yeshiva, especially Bachurim who wrote to the Rebbe about their what we call sins of youth, which is nocturnal emission, and masturbation and things like that. And they would ask the Rebbe for a tikkun, for a tshuva. And almost consistently, the Rebbe would say, number one, hesach hadas, divert your thought from thinking about it. Don't spend another moment thinking about what you did. Now, the Rebbe said, memorize Torah Bal Peh is one tikkun, giving tzedakah every day before davening is another tikkun, etc., etc. But the first thing was hesach hadas. Don't go back to think about it. Because you're not going to get any closer to the solution. And tikkun, because when you think about sin, you sink into sin. As you're trying to get out of sin, you're sinking. So, just don't think about it. You need to do tshuva. Learn by heart Mishnayos, Pirkei Avos, Chasidus, give tzedakah, etc., etc. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that the Alter Rebbe says the same thing here. Persistent thought. You cited the translation of Rabbi Shachar, or whoever translated over there. Persistent thought is what the Beinoni does not do. Why? Because the Nefesh Elikiyah says, don't go that, or don't do that. Don't do that. The fact that it enters your mind, we're human. Let's continue. And he says, the first line, the last two words, he doesn't engage in active thought, how to carry out, to fulfill the indulgence of the heart. And here comes the Alter Rebbe's explanation, Isser. How is it? To say that it is this way, very nice. How? The Alter Rebbe gives a reason, a logical reason. It's Tanya, it's Chassidus Chabad. He gives the reason, and these are the famous words. Ki hamoyach shalit al halev, the mind over matter, in simple English. The mind dominates over the heart. And he adds the words, B'tol dusay. That's a chiddush. That's a novelty. Genetically, by birth, told us. You understand what Dr. Rebbe is saying here? That the human being, Avi, every human being, you don't have to be a Jew for this. You have to be a human, not an animal. And we're humans. So by being humans, God has put within the human condition the innate ability for the mind to have the power to shalit, to dominate. Now we'll talk about this later more. What?
It's kind of like control, like self-control.
Yes. But the word is shalit. It doesn't mean to say that the lev, the heart, is going to go along. The lev's going to give you a hard time. And to make the lev, to make the heart be on par with the moyach, it doesn't say that either here. It says, ki ha-moyach shalit ala lev. B'tol dusay. What the Alter Rebbe is arguing and positioning is that Hashem creates the human being with the ability for the mind to control the heart. Control. And now, and look further, he says, V'tevi b'toldusay, v'tevi yitzirosay. He adds words. And it's the nature of creation, of man's creation. So man was created by God. Shekol Adam. Look at the word here. Shekol Adam. It doesn't say this person, yeah, and this person not. It says Shekol Adam. Every person. He could, she could, with the willingness, with the ratzon, with the willpower within the mind, lehisapek v'limshoyel, to control, to dominate, beruach taivosei shebelivoi, with the spirit of indulgence in the heart, shalei lemalis mishalis liboi, not to do whatever the heart wants and desires in b'maiseh, dibur u'machshava. Ulahasiach daite legamri. The same idea that the Rebbe said about diverting thought. The Alter Rebbe uses the same word, ulahasiach, and to divert your mind legamri, completely, mitayvasly, from the indulgence of the heart, the craving of the heart, elahepech legamri, to the very opposite, to desire and crave good. So the Alter Rebbe here just gave us his shita, and this is really the shita of the Tanya, what he says in chapter 12, that he believes that moyach shalat alev b'toldusay v'tzirusay b'chol adam, and because this is his belief, therefore, every person can control themselves from the biggest taivas. Now, here we start questioning and thinking about, does this apply to an addiction? That's a whole different story. And it could be that in the addictive state, this doesn't apply. Why? Because in the addictive state, when it's real addiction, there's no moyach. What does he say here? Moyach shalat al alev. What if you don't have a head? Everyone has a head. But what if your head's not functioning? I don't mean not functioning because you didn't use your brains. We're talking about if the head's messed up, if the head is, I don't know, psychologist, whatever the conditions are, that's a different story. But as long as there's moyach beroishoi, the moyach can control the heart. But the Alter Rebbe says the word here, beritzoinoi. Look at the word. He says, Shekol Adam, line number 4 in middle. Shekol Adam yochol biritzoinoi. You have to be willing. If you're not willing, Hillel, if you're not willing to use your brain that God gave you, the fact that you were born with this capability is not going to help you because you're lazy. Yes, Moshe.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, when you were saying that mental illness, God forbid, suicidal thoughts, the whole world of mental illness, I assume is when you say a person doesn't have the ability, I assume
that's part of it. That's part of it. But you have to be trained and knowledgeable, that it's indeed that, not that it's an excuse. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry will say, I have mental illness. My parents have beat me up. My teacher beat me up. I mean, I don't think that's what the Alter Rebbe is talking about here. But, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's wrong for the parents to beat you up, and it's wrong for your teachers to beat you up, and it's all wrong. And you're not blamed for that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you don't have a head. So again, if it's indeed a mental illness, and then it's mental illness, and this is the big question. It's a big question. Not only in civil law, it's also in halacha. In the Gemara, it talks about when you come to give edus, is your testimony. Are you well or mentally not well? I mean, that's why we have what's called Shevach Kiras Adrishas, where you're supposed to check out the witnesses in 7 different ways, to establish whether, mentally they're sound. But I'm saying that just to use this as an excuse, there's mental illness here because his father beat him when he was a kid. I'm not sure that's the accepted way. It was wrong for the father to beat him, and it's very bad and needs to be dealt with. It's true, but that's an excuse for a taiva, for acting on a taiva. And again, even if the taiva, this is a deep conversation. I'm not deep. I mean, it's beyond the scope of what we're learning in Tanya, at least for me. Because you have to really be trained, and I would think a person like a Rabbi Tursky, Olav Shalom, and people like that who both are we're knowledgeable in the Torah's view, really, not just made up, but really knowledgeable of Torah, Gemara, Chassidus, Halacha, plus psychology and psychiatry, I would think that they are more the spokesman. And the Rebbe consulted with him and Dr. Landis in Palo Alto, when he in 1979, when the Rebbe called for making kosher Jewish meditation to give people who were doing transcendental meditation mantras that were associated with idolatry. The Rebbe, I heard the Sikha. I was in Kansas City in the summer camp, and I remember listening was Yud Beis Tammuz, the summer of '79. And the Rebbe spoke about this idea, and I since read it, and he was very careful in what he was saying. He wasn't saying it's for everyone, but he says for those that need it, that will help them therapeutically to deal with their issues, let us make a kosher meditative way where instead of using an idol as a mantra, to use a kosher thing. So what do we see? What do we see? What's one of the things that I walk away with from that talk that the Rebbe gave is that, there are medical needs which go beyond what the Alter Rebbe says here. No, well, why do we need that? Tell everyone who has issues, what do you need meditation for? What do you need meditation for? Just what are you, a little baby? Exert yourself, work on yourself. It's not so simple. It's not so simple. There are outside things that require professional help and professional techniques. And I think we could all say in today's world, it's not 79, it's 50 years later, it's only becoming more and more. And anyone that's in the mental health field that has a connection to Torah will do good for Yiddishkeit and for Torah and for people by creating good ways of how that people with mental health issues can use. Hillel. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Moshe.
I just want to say it just seems to me, I guess the two Hillels certainly can comment on this much more, but it seems like today we're in a situation where I wonder what the two Hillels would say about this, but it seems like the line between what's considered to be mental illness and just, we live in a world now today, the secular, the outside world is basically saying that, more and more that everything's okay. And people are, the amount of, seems like confusion that so many people have as to what's right and what's wrong. I wonder if mental health professionals would say that it's like the line between who is like mentally healthy and who's not is sort of becoming blurred. I don't know. I'm just asking.
Yeah. Let's hear what Hillel Roosevelt. Hillel, yes. What do you say?
Okay. Two things. First of all, many years ago, long before I was from, a Jewish couple came to me for marriage counseling. Okay, and what they put on the table as their issues is that they were friends with a number of couples, and they would get together every Saturday night. They'd have a big meal, and they all had big houses, and so they'd have a big meal together, and then they would swap spouses. So I asked the couple, well, why are you here? So they wanted to know whether I thought that they were mentally ill. So I said to them, I don't consider this mental illness. I said, I consider this as something of a matter of choice.
Morally ill.
And
Morally ill.
If you're right. Right, and that's what I said. I said, I don't usually say this in working with clients, but this is really an ethical question, and you should talk to your rabbi about it. So anyway, that's one thing. The second thing is that I did a little research, and because this whole idea of like what can stimulate an urge within a person, and they might even say, well, I don't even remember what precipitated it. So I Googled the question, how fast is thought? And the initial thought based on exposure to something is 100 milliseconds, which is 1/10 of a second. And then this whole thing of the surfacing urge and what to do about it and everything, that takes place after that first half second. So a person doesn't even have to be aware of that first half second, and they might not even associate that exposure to what they all of a sudden now are thinking about and dwelling. So, I mean, that in many respects, that's one of the principles that comes out of cognitive therapy. And then just quickly, the third thing is that mental health, there can be issues of mental health, and that would not qualify to be called mental illness. First of all, there's a whole set of personality disorders, and there are other mental health issues that challenge people that do not meet the mark of, serious mental illness. We have to also remember that if we're living in an immoral society, it's like Sodom and Gomorrah. We're surrounded by stuff that causes Gilbolim in our minds, because we're getting so many different messages at the same time.
So what is your short answer to Moshe's question? Moshe's question was, he says it seems like today it's been blurred, the difference between real mental health issues and non. That's what he asked. Would you say yes, no? Yes. Okay. Hillel Satan. Go ahead. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What?
I was going to say the answer is yes, because there's a certain degradation. You yourself spoke about Tel Aviv. There's a certain degradation in society. And at the same time, parallel to that, the more degradation there is, the less sense of attachment to Hashem and to Torah, etc. And I think that, as another Hasidic Rebbe said, that there's a great atheism coming on the world. And I think that we see proof of that in terms of even how people dress now.
Yeah. Yes. I have a 1 minute to take Hillel's point, then I have to go to another shir. Hillel.
The tradition, the way I was trained, mental illness really was defined by reality testing, and the term mental illness, and that I think you could find a parallel in the halacha to be whether somebody would be kosher laedis, whether or they'd be patur, because on the level of reality testing. I think what we've been discussing here is a confusion that's largely in the realm of what kind of a new distinction in psychological typology of gender dysphoria, of kind of confusion around identity and sexuality, and the efforts to kind of normalize it or sanction it, which I think is like Hillel said, is a kind of moral confusion. It's not and very tragic and unfortunate. But I think that the key distinction here is in what we're learning revolves around the word ratzon, because somebody who would be traditionally considered mentally ill is somebody who could not be reliably could be said to have a ratzon.
Correct.
In order to test reality.
Right. But as Moshe said, that's being blurred today.
In the realm of gender and sexuality, it sure is.
Yeah.
And I think that's a and that is a kind of moral and cultural decline, if you will.
Yeah. Chevra, we'll learn tomorrow. Good conversation. Have a great day, everyone. Shalom. Take care. Bye-bye.